Imagine a company so powerful it controlled armies, governed vast territories, and influenced the fate of millions. This was no ordinary business, it was the East India Company, a force that shaped the history of Britain and India from the early 1600s to the mid-1800s. From trading spices to ruling empires, the Compania's reach was unprecedented. But how did a trading company become a political and military powerhouse? What was the true extent of its influence, and how did it change the course of history? Hello and warm greetings to you. Thank you for joining me on this fascinating journey into the world of the East India Company and its incredible rise to power. The story of the East India Company is not just about commercia, it is about empire, warfare, and transformation. As we explore its history, consider this question: do you think a private company should ever have the power to rule millions and wage wars? I look forward to your thoughts and comments. Now, let's uncover the true power behind the East India Company. In the dawn of the 17th century, a new chapter in global trade began with the founding of the East India Company in 1600. Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter that empowered this ambitious enterprise to pursue commerce in the distant lands of Asia. The promise was Aluringa spices, silks, and precious goods that had long captivated European markets awaited beyond the horizon. From the bustling ports of London, ships set sail into the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, carrying with them hopes of fortune and expansion. The journey was perilous, stretching months across unpredictable seas, but the potential rewards kept the spirit of adventure alive. Upon reaching the shores of the Indian it became more than a mere trading post, it was the beginning of a complex relationship with the region, marked by negotiation and adaptation. The company carefully navigated the intricate political landscape, forging alliances and understanding the local customs essential to sustained commerce. As the decades unfolded, the East India Company extended its reach. New outposts emerged in Madras, with its strategic location along the Coromandel coast. And later in Bombay, a burgeoning harbour with potential for greater influence. These settlements acted as nodes in a growing network that facilitated the flow of goods and information, linking distant worlds through commerce. Yet, during the 1600s, the company's role remained primarily commercial. Its ambitions were modest, focused on securing valuable goods and maintaining profitable trade relations. Political power was not yet within its grasp, and its influence lay in merchant dealings rather than territorial control. The company learned to maneuver carefully, balancing diplomacy with firmness to protect its operations amid competition from other European powers and local rulers. Throughout this period, the East India Company's ships carried exotic commodities back to Europe. Spices like pepper and cinnamon, fine textiles such as cotton and silk, and rare treasures these goods transformed European tastes and economies, weaving the distant East into the fabric of daily life thousands of miles away. At home, the company grew in stature, its shareholders and directors managing a sprawling enterprise that depended on far-flung connections and detailed knowledge of foreign lands. The challenges were immense, from the threat of piracy to the complexities of long-distance communication. But the drive for profit spurred innovation in navigation, finance, and diplomacy. The early years of the East India Company set a foundation for what would become a profound impact on global history. While still limited to commerce by the late 1600s, its presence in India was a seed planted in fertile ground. The company's adaptability and ambition hinted at a future far beyond simple trade. The century closed with the East India Company poised on the edge of transformation. Its trading posts had become permanent fixtures, its influence growing in subtle ways. This era was one of cautious expansion and careful alliances, a prelude to the greater roles it would play in the centuries to come. The story of the East India Company's founding and early years is a tale of exploration, commerce, and the forging of connections across continents. It reflects a world in transition, where distant shores became linked through the determination of merchants and the promise of global exchange. In the dawn of the 18th century, a powerful company began to stretch its influence far beyond mere commerce. Once focused on the Dutch and the French, formidable competitors in the race for control of global trade routes and markets. These rivalries sparked a series of conflicts that were as much about economic survival as they were about prestige and power. The stakes were immense: a control of the riches and resources of the East. Trade alone could no longer guarantee security or success. The company recognized the need to defend its expanding interests with force. This realization marked a significant turning point. It began building a private army, recruiting and training soldiers to protect its commercial ventures and territorial claims. This militarization blurred the lines between merchant enterprise and imperial ambition, transforming the company into a formidable power with both economic and military reach. By the middle of the century, this blend of commerce and conflict bore fruit. The company was no longer just a trader, it had become a ruler. Its influence extended into the very governance of regions within India. Territories once under local control now paid taxes to this foreign entity, signaling a profound shift in power dynamics. These changes unfolded against a backdrop of political intrigue and shifting alliances. The company's private army engaged in battles and skirmishes, consolidating control over key regions. Each victory expanded its footprint and deepened its authority. The transformation was dramatic. What began as a commercial venture had evolved into a sovereign power with the ability to levy taxes, administer justice, and command loyalty from a growing population. Amid these developments, the company had to navigate a world where rival European powers watched and maneuvered carefully. The Dutch and the French sought to check its expansion, challenging it on both land and sea. Each confrontation was a test of strategy, resources, and resilience. The Compagnie's rise was marked by both opportunity and danger. Its expanding role in governance required new forms of administration and diplomacy. Managing diverse peoples and cultures across vast territories presented complex challenges. The Compagnie's leaders had to balance profit-making with the practical demands of ruling. This period set the stage for the Compagnie's future dominance. The foundations laid in these decades: a military strength, territorial control, and administrative authority would become pillars of its empire. The legacy of these early struggles and strategies would echo through the years that followed. The story of this company in the early 1700s is one of transformation and tension. As the company solidified its control, it also laid claim to a new identity: no longer merely traders, but rulers with a destiny tied to the fate of the regions under their sway. The conflicts with European rivals underscored the high stakes of this era. Control of trade routes and territories was a prize that demanded both cunning and force. Success required navigating not just markets, but also wars and alliances. By 1750, the company stood as a formidable power, wielding influence that extended well beyond its commercial origins. It had become a symbol of the expanding reach of empire, its private army a tangible expression of its authority. The story of this era is one of growing ambition meeting fierce opposition, of trade routes contested and territories claimed. In these decades, the Compagnie's transformation laid the groundwork for the vast empire it would eventually build, shaping the course of history in the region and beyond. This narrative is a vivid chapter in the broader story of Empire, a tale of rivalry, adaptation, and the pursuit of power in a changing world. The year was 1757, a moment destined to alter the course of history in India and beyond. The East India Company, a private trading enterprise turned military force. On the other, the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, defending one of the wealthiest regions in India with the support of French allies. The Battle of Plassey unfolded as a clash not just of armies, but of empires and ambitions. Robert Clive, a determined and shrewd leader, commanded the East India Compagnie's forces. His army was smaller but strategically sharp, equipped with European training and driven by the Compagnie's economic stakes. The Nawab, though commanding greater numbers, faced internal divisions and betrayals that would prove decisive. The battlefield near the town of Plassey became the stage for a turning point. The Campania's forces leveraged tactical precision, while secret agreements and defections among the Nawab's ranks weakened his position. When the dust settled, the East India Company emerged victorious. This victory was far more than a military success. It marked the transformation of the East India Company from a mere trading entity into a powerful political force. Control over Bengal, with its fertile lands and thriving commerce, meant access to vast revenues and influence. The company now held the keys to govern millions, collect taxes, and administer territories. Bengal's wealth became the engine driving the Campania's expansion across India. The administration of land revenue was a complex and delicate task, one that required establishing new systems and officials. The company began to act as a government, imposing laws and managing local affairs in ways that shaped the region's future. The East India Campania's victory at Plassey laid the groundwork for British imperial dominance in India. Beyond politics and economics, the battle symbolized a new era of colonial interaction. The East India Company was no longer just a merchant seeking profits, it had become a ruler shaping policies, cultures, and societies. The dynamics of power were forever altered, setting the stage for the vast British Empire that would come to dominate the region. The French, aligned with the Nawab, sought to challenge British influence, but their defeat weakened their position. This victory secured British supremacy in the region, marginalizing other European competitors. The legacy of Plassey extended beyond the battlefield. It was the beginning of a century of political maneuvering, alliances, and conflicts that would weave the East India Company into the fabric of Indian governance. The Campania's role expanded from commerce to administration, military campaigns, and diplomacy. This transformation was not without consequence. The Campania's control brought changes to Indian society, economy, and culture. New systems of taxation and land ownership disrupted traditional structures. The balance of power shifted dramatically, influencing the lives of millions under its rule. The Battle of Plassey remains a defining moment in history. It exemplifies how military victory, combined with political strategy, can redefine empires. The East India Campania's rise from traders to rulers was a story of ambition, opportunity, and transformation that shaped the modern world. As the company consolidated power, its influence spread steadily. The administration of Bengal became a model for control that extended into other regions, with increasing military campaigns and governance reforms. The seed sown at Plassey grew into a vast imperial structure that lasted for centuries. In this moment, the balance of power in India shifted irrevocably. The East India Campania's victory was not just a conquest of land, but a conquest of political authority. It set a precedent for how commerce, military strength, and governance could intertwine to build an empire. The story of Plassey is a testament to the complexities of power, diplomacy, and ambition in the 18th century. It is a chapter where a private company reshaped the destiny of a nation, altering history through decisive action and strategic insight. This battle changed everything. It marked the dawn of British political dominance in India, and heralded a new era of empire, one built not just on trade but on control, administration, and the exercise of power over millions of lives. In the decades following the decisive Battle of Plassey, the East India Company transformed from a mere trading enterprise into a powerful governing force. With Bengal firmly under its control, the company faced the enormous challenge of administering a vast and diverse territory, home to millions of people. To manage this complexity, the company established administrative systems that blended traditional local structures with British legal and bureaucratic frameworks. Tax collection became a central focus, as revenue was essential to sustain both governance and the Campania's commercial ambitions. The company imposed land revenue systems that extracted wealth directly from Indian agriculture, reshaping rural economies and livelihoods. Trade regulation was another key aspect of administration. The company sought to control the flow of goods, ensuring that its own commercial interests were prioritized. This meant overseeing markets, managing tariffs, and often monopolizing valuable commodities. Ports and trade routes came under strict company control, linking local production with global demand. Maintaining law and order was vital to preserving authority in the territories. Company officials organized policing and judicial systems, sometimes blending indigenous legal customs with British laws. This created a complex and often contradictory system, where justice was administered in the service of both governance and profit. The officials of the East India Company wielded immense power. They were not only traders but also rulers, administrators, and magistrates. Their decisions affected millions of lives, and their motivations blended personal gain with official duty. During this period, the extraction of wealth from India accelerated dramatically. The revenue collected and resources controlled by the company flowed back to Britain, fueling economic growth and industrial development. This transfer of wealth helped lay the foundations for Britannia's expanding empire and its position as a global power. The Compania's administration had profound effects on Indian society. Traditional systems were disrupted, and new economic pressures emerged. Farmers, artisans, and merchants found themselves navigating unfamiliar regulations and demands. Social and political structures were reshaped under the weight of colonial control. Despite these challenges, the Compania's governance was marked by pragmatism and adaptation. Officials often relied on local intermediaries and existing power networks to enforce policies. This allowed the company to extend its reach without overwhelming resistance, although conflicts and uprisings did occur. Communication and record-keeping improved as the company invested in bureaucratic machinery. Detailed accounts, surveys, and reports helped officials monitor revenues and manage territories more effectively. This growing administrative sophistication reflected the increasing complexity of colonial rule. The period from 1760 to 1800 represents a crucial phase in the making of the British Empire in India. It was a time when commercial interests merged with political authority, creating a new form of governance driven by economic control. This fusion of trade and administration set a precedent for colonial rule elsewhere. It demonstrated how economic exploitation and political power could be intertwined to sustain imperial dominance. The legacy of this era is visible in the patterns of governance and economic relations that continued into the 19th century. The systems put in place by the company shaped the development of India under British rule for decades to come. Through the lens of administration and economic control, the story of the East India Company reveals the complexities of empire building. It was a story of ambition, adaptation, and profound impact on both Britain and India. As wealth flowed from the fields and markets of Bengal to the banks and factories of Britain, a new global order was taking shape. The East India Company was at the center, a force that combined commerce and governance in a way that would define an age. This period laid the groundwork for the expansion of British power across the subcontinent, and for the economic transformations that would ripple across the world. It was a chapter marked by control, calculation, and the far-reaching consequences of empire. By the mid-18th century, the East India Company had transformed from a trading enterprise into a formidable military power. Its private army, initially modest, swelled to hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Among them were countless Indian sepoys, local troops trained and led by British officers who became the backbone of the Compania's military strength. This vast force was not merely for defense. It was a tool of expansion, wielded to secure and grow the company's territorial holdings. Amid the complex and often volatile political landscape of the Indian subcontinent, the company faced numerous challenges from established Indian rulers, rival European powers seeking their own influence, and internal rebellions that threatened to destabilize its growing empire. The Anglo-Mysore Wars stand out as some of the fiercest clashes of this era. The Kingdom of Mysore, under leaders like Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan, fiercely resisted British encroachment. These wars were marked by intense battles, shifting alliances, and moments of both triumph and setback. Tipu Sultan, known as the Tiger of Mysore, became a symbol of resistance against colonial expansion. Parallel to this struggle were the Anglo-Maratha Wars, a series of conflicts with the Maratha Confederacy, one of the dominant powers in India at the time. These wars tested the Campania's strategic and military capabilities. The Marathas, skilled warriors and tacticians, offered fierce resistance to British advances. But over time, British forces secured decisive victories that dismantled Maratha power. The Campania's military campaigns were complex affairs, fought over vast and varied terrains. From dense forests and rugged hills to fertile plains and fortified cities. Success required not only military might but also diplomacy, intelligence gathering, and sometimes ruthless suppression of dissent. The Campania's army adapted European military techniques to local conditions, integrating sepoys who brought invaluable knowledge of the land and regional warfare. This fusion of British discipline and Indian expertise created a force capable of confronting diverse enemies across a vast and culturally varied territory. The result was the emergence of the East India Company as the dominant power in much of India by the first half of the 19th century. Its influence extended beyond mere trade and politics, directly shaping the future of the subcontinent through military conquest and governance. This period of expansion was not without cost. War brought destruction and upheaval, impacting millions of lives. The conflicts reflected the larger contest for power in India, where traditional kingdoms and new imperial forces clashed over control and survival. As the Campania's dominion expanded, so did its responsibilities. Governing vast territories required new administrative structures and the ability to maintain order. The military remained a key pillar of this system, guarding against threats both external and internal. The years between 1760 and 1850 were transformative. They marked the shift of the East India Company from a commercial entity into a quasi-sovereign power with its own army and political ambitions. Through war and diplomacy, it carved out an empire that laid the groundwork for British colonial rule. This military expansion was a decisive factor in shaping modern India's history. It altered political boundaries, disrupted centuries-old power balances, and introduced a new era of foreign dominance. The legacy of these conflicts echoes in the cultural and political fabric of the region to this day. In the grand tapestry of imperial history, the East India Company's military rise is a testament to the profound changes wrought by commerce, war, and ambition. In the vast and complex world of 18th-century commerce, one company stood apart as a titan of trade and influence. Holding a monopoly over British commerce with India and China, this enterprise was not just a business, it was a force that shaped economies, cultures, and politics across continents. The Campania's grip on Indian textiles was unyielding. Fine fabrics woven in distant looms traveled across oceans, meeting the insatiable demand of European markets. These textiles were not mere commodities, they became symbols of wealth and style, coveted in drawing rooms and marketplaces alike. Equally significant was the Campania's role in the importation of Chinese tea. This aromatic leaf captivated Britain, transforming everyday rituals and becoming a cultural staple. The tea trade was lucrative beyond measure, fueling coffers and expanding the Campania's reach far beyond simple buying and selling. This dominance in trade translated into power that extended well beyond commercial transactions. The Campania's influence rippled through global trade networks, intertwining with diplomacy and international relations. Its decisions could tilt markets, sway local rulers, and influence foreign policies. Acting as a semi-governmental body, the company wielded authority that blurred the line between commerce and statecraft. It negotiated treaties, collected taxes, and maintained armies. In many ways, it was an empire within an empire, governing vast populations and territories under its control. Its ships sailed not just to deliver goods, but to project power and protect interests. Ports and cities under its sway became hubs of economic activity and political control. The Campania's emblem flew over fortresses and trading posts, signaling the presence of a far-reaching dominion. Within this system, profits flowed like rivers, funding further expansion and innovation. The wealth generated underpinned Britannia's broader imperial ambitions, providing the resources necessary to build armies, fleets, and infrastructure across the globe. Yet, this monopoly was not without challenges. Rival traders, shifting alliances, and local resistance constantly tested the Campania's grip. The balance between commerce and control required constant vigilance and strategic maneuvering. The Campania's ability to navigate these challenges demonstrated its adaptability and resilience. It evolved from a mere trading enterprise into a complex organization capable of managing diplomacy, warfare, and governance. This transformation had profound implications for the regions it touched. Economies were reshaped, social structures altered, and cultural exchanges intensified. The flow of goods became intertwined with the flow of ideas, technologies, and power. In controlling trade routes and markets, the company also controlled the flow of influence. Its decisions reverberated through distant lands, affecting lives in ways both visible and subtle. The story of this trade monopoly is a story of ambition and influence. It illustrates how commerce can become a vehicle for power and how economic interests can drive political and social change. As the company expanded, it also laid the foundations for modern global trade systems. The networks it established and the practices it developed shaped patterns of exchange that persist to this day. Understanding this legacy helps us grasp the complexities of empire and commerce, revealing how intertwined they have been in shaping the world. The Campania's journey from merchant house to imperial power underscores the dynamic nature of history. It is a testament to the ways in which trade can transform societies and the lasting impact of economic dominance. In the grand narrative of global history, this Campania's monopoly stands as a pivotal chapter, one where trade, diplomacy, and empire converge to create a new world order. The arrival of the East India Company as a ruling power in India brought profound changes to the social and economic fabric of the land. What began as a commercial enterprise transformed into a regime that reshaped the lives of millions, often in ways that disrupted long-established traditions and livelihoods. One of the most visible impacts was on the traditional industries that had flourished for centuries. The art of hand-weaving, practiced by skilled artisans across villages and towns, faced severe decline. British factory-made textiles, produced with the efficiency of machines and sold at lower prices, flooded the Indian markets. This competition was impossible for local craftsmen to withstand. The slow, delicate processes that had defined their craft could not match the speed and volume of industrial production. As British goods replaced indigenous products, many weavers and craftsmen found their sources of income vanishing. Entire communities that had relied on these trades faced economic hardship. This shift altered not only the economy but also the cultural identity tied to these artisanal crafts, which had been woven into the social fabric for generations. Beyond the decline of traditional industries, the Campania's land taxation policies placed enormous burdens on the peasantry. The system of revenue collection was often harsh and inflexible, demanding fixed payments regardless of harvest success. For many peasants, this meant facing the double blow of poor crops and relentless tax demands. The consequences were devastating. Famines, already a recurring reality in India's history, became more frequent and severe under the pressure of these economic strains. When harvests failed, peasants struggled to pay taxes. And without relief, widespread starvation followed. The Campania's administration, focused more on revenue than welfare, often failed to provide adequate support during these crises. This economic distress rippled through rural life, altering patterns of land ownership and social relations. Many small farmers lost their land, which was acquired by wealthier landlords or company officials. This concentration of land created new social hierarchies and shifted power dynamics within villages and regions. Cultural and social structures also underwent transformation during company rule. The imposition of new administrative systems and laws challenged existing customs and authority. Traditional rulers and local elites saw their influence wane as the company introduced its own officials and governance methods. Religious and social practices sometimes came under scrutiny or were reshaped to align with colonial policies. Education, language, and legal systems were affected, often promoting British values and perspectives at the expense of indigenous traditions. These changes contributed to a growing sense of disruption and identity crisis among various communities. Yet, amidst these challenges, Indian society showed resilience. Communities adapted to new realities in different ways, maintaining cultural practices while navigating the pressures of colonial rule. New social and political movements began to emerge, sowing the seeds for future resistance and reform. The impact of the East India Company's rule was complex and multifaceted. It was not merely an economic or political shift but a profound transformation touching every aspect of life. The decline of traditional industries, the strain on peasants, and the reshaping of social orders were intertwined elements of a changing world. This period laid the groundwork for India's later struggles and aspirations. The hardships faced under company rule galvanized voices demanding justice, equity, and self-determination. The economic disruptions highlighted the need for new paths forward, while cultural changes sparked debates about identity and sovereignty. Understanding the impact on Indian society and economy during this era reveals the deep and lasting effects of colonial rule. It is a story of disruption and adaptation, hardship and resilience. The legacy of this time continues to influence India's social and economic landscape even today. In this chapter of history, the transformation of India under company rule serves as a powerful reminder of how shifts in power can ripple through societies, altering lives in profound and enduring ways. It invites reflection on the cost of empire and the strength of human endurance amidst change. The year was 1857, a time when deep-rooted tensions simmered beneath the surface of British rule in India. What followed was a powerful and sweeping uprising that would shake the foundations of the East India Company's control. Known as the Indian Rebellion or the Sepoy Mutiny, this revolt was not a sudden explosion but the culmination of years of mounting resentment. For decades, economic exploitation had drained the wealth of the land. Farmers struggled under heavy taxation, local artisans faced competition from British-manufactured goods. And traditional systems were disrupted. The promises of prosperity under colonial rule rang hollow as many Indians saw their livelihoods deteriorate. Cultural insensitivity further inflamed anger. The British often disregarded local customs, traditions, and religious beliefs. This lack of respect deepened divisions and bred mistrust. It was in the military, however, where grievances found a spark. The Indian soldiers, known as sepoys, formed the backbone of the Company's army. These men were trained and equipped to enforce British rule. But their loyalty was fragile. Rumors spread that new rifle cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat, substances offensive to Hindu and Muslim soldiers. Whether true or not, this was perceived as an attack on their faith and honor. When the first shots were fired, the rebellion quickly spread. It engulfed large parts of northern and central India. Cities like Delhi, Lucknow, and Kanpur became centers of fierce fighting. The rebels united diverse groups with a common cause: a resistance against foreign domination. The uprising was marked by both bravery and tragedy. It challenged the Company's authority like never before and revealed the vulnerability of British control. Yet, despite its initial successes, the rebellion lacked unified leadership and faced overwhelming military response. British forces regrouped and launched a determined campaign to crush the revolt. Reinforcements arrived from Britain and other parts of the empire. Over months of brutal conflict, the uprising was eventually suppressed. Though the rebellion failed to overthrow British rule, its impact was profound. It exposed the flaws of company governance and forced a reckoning in London. The British government took direct control, dissolving the East India Company and establishing the British Raj. This marked a new chapter in Indian history. The administration sought to reform policies, paying closer attention to cultural sensitivities and local customs. Military recruitment and discipline were overhauled to prevent future unrest. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 became a symbol of resistance and awakening. It inspired later generations who sought independence and self-determination. Its legacy is complex, a story of courage, suffering, and the harsh realities of empire. The uprising changed the relationship between Britain and India forever. It ended one era of colonial rule and set the stage for another, more direct and controlled form of governance. It also highlighted the growing desire among Indians for greater participation and respect. In the aftermath, the British Empire reinforced its military presence and administrative control. But it also recognized the need for a more nuanced approach. The rebellion was a warning that domination by force alone could not sustain an empire. The echoes of 1857 continue to resonate in the history and identity of India. This was a turning point, where resistance met repression. And change became inevitable. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of a people determined to assert their rights amid the tides of history. The year 1857 marked a pivotal moment in the history of British India. The outbreak of a widespread rebellion, often called the Sepoy Mutiny or the First War of Independence, shook the foundations of the East India Company's control. What began as a military uprising soon spread across vast regions, fueled by deep resentment towards company policies and British interference in Indian society. The rebellion exposed the vulnerabilities and limitations of company rule. It was clear to the British government that relying on a commercial enterprise to govern such a vast and diverse land was no longer viable. The scale and intensity of the uprising forced a dramatic re-evaluation of imperial governance. In 1858, a decisive change came with the passing of the Government of India Act. This legislation transferred authority from the East India Company directly to the British Crown, marking the official end of company rule. The company itself was formally dissolved, closing a chapter that had lasted more than 2 centuries. India's governance shifted from a private corporation's hands into the formal machinery of the British state. The British government appointed a viceroy to represent the Crown and oversee the vast territories now known as the British Raj. The British Raj represented not just a change in authority but also a new era of imperial control. The administration promised reforms and stability, seeking to prevent future uprisings through a combination of military strength and political concessions. Yet, the system also entrenched colonial rule more deeply than before. Though the East India Company ceased to exist, its legacy remained deeply embedded in India's political and social fabric. The infrastructure, legal systems, and economic patterns established under company rule continued to shape the colonia's development. For many Indians, the end of company rule was a complex moment. It meant the replacement of one form of foreign domination with another. While the Crown's direct rule brought some reforms, it also maintained policies that reinforced British interests and suppressed nationalist aspirations. The British Raj would last nearly a century, shaping India's modern history in profound ways. It played a role in transforming Indian society, economy, and politics, while also sowing the seeds of resistance and eventual independence movements. This transition was not merely a bureaucratic change. It was a redefinition of empire itself. The British Crown took on a more direct role, asserting its presence through a network of officials, soldiers, and advisors scattered across the subcontinent. The British Raj's establishment was accompanied by a narrative of civilizing mission and modernization. The crown justified its rule as a duty to bring order, progress, and good governance to India. Yet beneath this narrative lay the realities of control, exploitation, and cultural domination. As the 19th century progressed, India under the British Raj became central to the empire's wealth and global influence. The colony provided raw materials, markets, and strategic advantage, fueling Britannia's industrial and imperial ambitions. The end of company rule and the beginning of the British Raj thus represent a critical turning point. They symbolize the transformation of British imperialism from mercantile enterprise to formal colonial statehood. This era laid the groundwork for the political struggles and cultural transformations that would define India's journey into the 20th century. The legacy of 1858 remains a powerful chapter in the story of empire and resistance, shaping the histories of both Britain and India for generations to come. The East India Company began as a modest trading enterprise. Yet its influence grew beyond commerce, evolving into one of the most powerful and transformative forces in world history. Its journey from trading spices and textiles to ruling vast territories in India shaped the destiny of millions and altered the course of nations. At its core, the company was a complex blend of trade, military might, and administration. Unlike any private enterprise before it, the East India Company wielded powers usually reserved for sovereign states. It commanded armies, negotiated treaties, collected taxes, and governed vast regions. This unique combination allowed it to extend British influence deep into the Indian subcontinent. Cities that were once independent flourished under company rule, while others faced upheaval and change. Its economic activities reshaped Indian society. The influx of British goods disrupted traditional industries, while the demand for raw materials integrated local economies into a global network. This new system created wealth for some, but also hardship and exploitation for many. The administration established by the company laid the groundwork for modern governance in India. It introduced legal codes, land revenue systems, and infrastructure projects. Though often driven by profit, these efforts contributed to the transformation of social and political structures. Military power was central to the company's success. Its private armies, composed of British officers and Indian soldiers, played decisive roles in securing territories and suppressing resistance. These forces ensured the company's dominance but also brought violence and disruption. Cultural encounters under the company's rule were complex and often fraught. Ideas, religions, and customs met and mingled, sometimes clashing, sometimes blending. The legacy of these interactions continues to influence India's diverse and vibrant society today. The company's story is also one of ambition and controversy. While it built vast fortunes and expanded British power, it also provoked criticism for its monopolies, corruption, and treatment of local populations. These tensions eventually led to reforms and, ultimately, the end of the company's rule. In 1858, after the upheaval of the Indian Rebellion, the British Crown assumed direct control over India, marking the close of the company's era. Yet, its legacy endured in the institutions, borders, and social fabric of the nation. The East India Company's tale is a powerful reminder of how private interests can shape the destiny of entire regions. It shows how commerce and conquest can intertwine, producing lasting impacts far beyond their original intentions. Understanding this legacy offers valuable insight into the complexities of empire, globalization, and cultural exchange. It reveals the enduring consequences of power wielded by both states and corporations. As a chapter in history, the company's rise and fall illustrates the dynamic forces that have shaped our modern world. Its influence on India and Britain echoes through time, a testament to the intertwined fates of empire, economy, and society. The story of the East India Company invites reflection on the costs and consequences of ambition, and on the intricate web of factors that define historical change. In the end, the company stands as a symbol of transformation of how trade, power, and governance can come together to rewrite the histories of peoples and nations across centuries. Thank you for joining this deep dive into the true power of the East India Company. This story shows how commerce turned into empire, and how business and politics intertwined on a vast scale. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep exploring the incredible stories of our past.